In our earlier tour of the Windows UI and Start screen, we touched on viewing apps that are running, switching between them, and closing them. Now, much of this was done using something called the switcher. And there's more that we can do with the switcher, so let's explore it in a little more depth now. First, we'll need some running apps. So let's go to our tiles here. I'm going to open up Weather. Now I'm going to return back to my Start screen by using the keyboard shortcut, which is the Windows key. Give it a tap. Let's run the calendar. That opens up the calendar again in full screen, just like our weather. And we'll go back to the Start screen, hitting the Windows key, and open up our desktop. Now here on the desktop, if we wanted to, we could have multiple apps running here as well. But we're going to go back to our Start screen, hitting the Windows key. And let's say we want to access any one of the running apps that are running in the background now. To access the switcher, we can move our mouse to the top or bottom left-hand corners of the screen. I'm going to go to the top left and then just guide my mouse down towards the center. If you go down to the bottom left-hand corner, you just start to guide your mouse up and you'll see the thumbnails representing each of the apps running in the background. Now notice that there is only one thumbnail for the desktop, and if you wanted to see all of the apps that are running on the desktop, you can't see them from the switcher here. You actually have to use the old-fashioned Alt-Tab keyboard shortcut to see all those apps and run through them as well. Now, using the keyboard shortcut to access the switcher, which is the Windows key and the Tab key, you can continue to hold down the Windows key while tapping the Tab key to cycle through the open apps here in the switcher, and then just simply release on the app you want to switch to. But with the mouse, we just click the one we want to go to. Let's click Calendar. All right, now what if we want to track the weather while we use our calendar? In Windows 8, we can have two apps running side by side using a snap feature. Just keep in mind, it'll only work with a high enough resolution. I'm using the minimum, 1366 by 768, and it's the width of 1366 that is the most important number here. So let's go back to our desktop. We can move into one of the hot corners in the top left or right and click the desktop. Anywhere on the desktop, right-click, go down to Screen Resolution and click there, and you'll see your current setting. And you can see mine is the minimum 1366 by 768. And if you need to, you can switch to a higher resolution from here. I'm just going to click outside and click Cancel. I know that my resolution's high enough for the snap feature to work. So we'll go back now to our calendar. Let's go up to the top left corner. And as we move down, we see our switcher. I'm going to click Calendar, and I'm back. All right, so one way to use a snap feature is from the top left corner. Let's say I did want to monitor the weather while I work on my calendar. We'll go back to the switcher. And if we want the weather to show up here on our screen, we can click and drag it. And as we move towards the right, you can see a little space opens up on the left for it. And when we release, it takes up that space down the left-hand side. Notice also that on the border, there are these three little dots indicating this is an adjustable border. If I wanted the majority of my screen taken up by the weather while monitoring my calendar, I can click and drag that over. And as I get past halfway, I can release. You can see what happens. The weather takes up the bigger part of the screen, my calendar over on the left. And of course, I can do the opposite, just drag it back. And now I have my two apps running side by side, snapped to fill the screen. Remember, you need a high enough resolution for any of this to work. And we can go back to our switcher at any time to select something to run in that larger area, like our calendar, for example. Now at any time, we can maximize also by just moving that border. Let's click and drag the border for our calendar on the right all the way to the right and release. You can see it's now taking up our full screen. So that's how the switcher works. Let's close up our running apps using the switcher before we continue on to the next movie. You can go up to the top left corner, move down, and when the switcher opens up, one option, let's say the weather we want to close up, is just click and drag it down all the way towards the bottom of your screen and release. You've just closed it. So if we go back to our switcher now and take a look, you can see the only other thing running is the desktop. Another option is to right-click and choose Close. Notice the snap options that appear there as well. We'll close it up, and we're going to close up our calendar as well here. So let's go to the top of the calendar screen now. When we see the hand, we'll click and drag it down to the very bottom, and we're back to our start screen.